Welcome to the Complete to Compete Title III program. We're glad you're with us. This program is brought to you by UAS Juneau and Sitka Career Services Programs. Please put your questions on the chat box and Deborah will answer them at the conclusion of the session. And today's program is virtual interviews. And your presenter is Deborah Reidman. Deborah is a University of Alaska Juneau campus career coordinator for all three campuses. She has over 15 years of experience working with high school and state job centers and has been working at the UAS Juneau campus for over 8 years with students and alumni. She knows what she's talking about. So please welcome Deborah.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. You know, things have changed significantly with the pandemic, and virtual interviews are really the thing that employers are doing right now. And especially with the different platforms that are being used for virtual interviews, this session is designed to help prepare you for those virtual interviews and know what you need to do in order to be effective with those. And with the way things are going, I think we're going to see more of this in the future because there's a lot of different platforms that are very effective and useful. And so the more comfortable we get with virtual interviews, the more effective our interviews are going to be. So as I always do, I start off with what's in it for me. So today we're going to be covering preparation before, and a lot of things that you can do to prepare for an interview are the same for an in-person interview as well as a virtual interview. So we're going to touch on a few of those things. We're going to just take a quick look at some of the platforms that are being used for virtual interviews, and then how you can kind of practice with some of them so you can get used to being able to interview on a virtual basis. Then next we're going to cover setting the stage. How do you get your space ready to go? What kinds of things do you need to take into consideration? What happens if something goes a little bit wonky? What is your response? So we have some strategies that we're going to go over on that today. Then there's some things that you can do just to make sure that you're ready to go the day of, and some strategies on closing the deal. So after the interview is over, what do you do next? So part of the preparation before an interview is, of course, to research the company and the position. And through that research, you'll be able to anticipate the types of questions that an employer will have for you. Now, here's a tip. So I would highly recommend that as you are applying for jobs, that you would save the job posting on a Word document, screenshot, however you want to do it, and put it in a folder on your desktop or somewhere on your phone or your tablet so that you can go back and review the job posting. Because when it comes to preparing for interviews, you're going to want to go back to that job posting to see if you can find some clues of some potential questions that they will ask. And the thing too is when you're in job search mode and you're applying for a variety of different positions, oftentimes you'll go, you know, I applied for this position 2 months ago, and all of a sudden they're calling you for an interview and you don't remember what position it was, and you go online to try to find it and it's gone. So that's another reason to save the job postings and just put them in a folder so you can access them when needed. So what we're going to do for preparation is trying to find some clues for the different questions that they might ask. In our previous session, we discussed how to deconstruct a job posting to try to find connection points, what types of things employers are looking for in a candidate, and then how you can present that on a resume or a cover letter. And for preparation for an interview, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're trying to look for some ideas of maybe some questions that they might ask. So for example, when we've got, let me go back. So as we see right here, we've got some underlined different words. So they might ask about your experience in arranging meetings. They might ask about editing correspondence. So as you're looking at these different points within the job posting, then you can maybe anticipate what types of questions that they're going to ask. The other thing that we're looking for is some potential situational questions. And so they might ask a question that starts out with, tell us about a time or describe a situation when you had to, etc. And this is more common. These types of questions, situational questions, are more common in an interview. Back in the day, I think there was maybe one or two, but it seems like more recently, employers are using exclusively situational questions in some instances. So as you're reviewing the job posting, you're looking for some potential situational questions that they might ask. And so in this case, what we're going to look at as an example is the very last one that is highlighted or underlined. It's under boundaries. So you could create a potential situational question, and then it would say, tell us about a time when you had to establish and maintain clear boundaries with others. And so then you would basically write out how you would answer that. Now, the technique to use for answering situational questions is called the STAR technique. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the STAR technique, but it's an acronym for the following. Your answer is going to include first, what was the situation? So you kind of, play out what was going on at the time, and then you move to the task that was at hand. You're going to explain the action that you took, and then share the result or outcome of your actions. And what I do, and what I would strongly encourage you to do, is identify those situational questions, those potential situational questions, and then write out your STAR story. And when you write out the S, the T, the A, and the R, and just write it out in a narrative form, then you've covered all of your bases. And then you would practice in front of a mirror, watching your facial expressions, because oftentimes as we're talking, our face does certain things, and you might want to kind of adjust that a little bit. When I was preparing for an interview one time, I was going through my STAR stories and practicing them in the mirror, and I found that when I was describing something I was passionate about, my facial expressions almost looked like I was angry or mad. It was just what my face was doing at the time. And so I thought, okay, I need to switch that up a little bit. So that is helpful. And it also gives you a chance to, again, practice something verbally. And so if that potential situational question comes up, then you're ready to go. You've already rehearsed it. And so it's pretty fresh in your mind. And with virtual interviews, just like with phone interviews, you can have your STAR stories with some prompts with that STAR story next to you if you need to refer to that. So this is a technique that works really well. One thing that I really want to highlight with this is the R. Make sure that the results or the outcome of your story is positive. And make sure that it is a result that may not or will not raise any red flags with the employer. So as you're thinking about the type of situational question and the STAR story you want to create for that, then think of a positive outcome and make sure that you include this. When I was working with our clients down in the Seattle area, when I was an employment specialist down there for the employment security department, we would do mock interviews with our clients. And for some reason, they kept forgetting to include the R. So we were coaching them on how to do that, and we'd practice again. So for some reason, sometimes it's easy just to leave that off, but include that. And also if you can include some quantification, what are the positive outcomes that include maybe an increase in effectiveness or, an increase in profit, depending on what that is. So you can try to measure it with some metrics if possible. Sometimes that doesn't work, but at least see if there is a result that you can include some proof with metrics. Now, I'm also asked in my role, how long should you take with a question, or your answer, I should say. And so ideally, make sure that that it lasts more than 30 seconds. If an answer is really short, then the interviewer is probably going, there could have been more information. And I hear this from our supervisors here at the university, that oftentimes students, they're not used to interviewing, their answers are very short. So when you're practicing for the types of questions, then again, maybe practice them in person and then time yourself and see if you're going at least 30 seconds, and then also no more than 3 minutes. Now, with the situational questions, your answers for those types of questions can maybe get a little bit longer, but try to gauge it within, again, 30 seconds and less than 3 minutes. Also, with your answers, you want to do what you can to show your value. So what are you going to be able to offer the employer by your answers? So those are a couple of tips. Now, here is a list of some commonly asked questions, and this document will be emailed to you following our presentation. So let's just take a look at a couple of these, but in preparation for an interview, you can practice your answers for some of these more commonly asked questions. And in the chat box, if you want to, include some of the questions that you have been asked consistently in interviews in the past, then we can kind of see what the average is between our attendees today. But for the very first one, typically they do ask, can you tell us something about yourself? And in the answer, you can see some guidelines on where to start and what you want to include. And we call this the 60-second interview. So you want to also time this out to see if you can get it to around 60 seconds. And so, so in preparation for an interview, you're going to write out how you would answer, can you tell us something about yourself? And you want to include those kinds of things that would be of value to that particular employer for that specific job. Always, why do you want to work here? I think every employer wants to know, what is it about us that attracts you to the company and to this position? So that's another one to write out. So you've got your words down, and then again, practice it. Now, the next two questions, they're still out there. They seem to be more tired questions. I've seen these start to fall off, but I just spoke with a student who was interviewing for a position, and sure enough, they did ask, what is one of your weaknesses? And so in this one, again, think about one strength when it comes to one of your strengths. Just think of one, and then think of a strength that, again, would be of value to the employer, and then talk a little bit about that. The next one, what is one of your weaknesses? And it's just one. You don't need to go into more than one. And the basis for this question, which I think is really interesting, is all about your self-awareness. So when it comes to those kinds of things for an employer to find out what your emotional quotient is, to find out, what you could bring to the table when it comes to your emotional quotient. But we all have weaknesses. And so what have we done to address a weakness, and how have we started to move that towards a strength? What you want to include in your answer to this is the process. So what type of process are you putting into place or have put into place to overcome that weakness? And how has that helped you as, vocationally and just personally to be able to offer that to an employer? Now, again, be careful about the red flags. So if you don't want to talk about something that is integral to the position, that they may wonder, okay, if they're in process of turning this weakness into a strength, they're still in the process. So try to think of one that is maybe a little bit outside of the responsibilities of the job, and then write it out again and see what you think. The last one, tell us about a time that you failed. What did you learn, and how did you handle the situation differently? This is a common question that has been coming up more frequently. So use the STAR technique to write out your answer for this. And the reason I'm saying to write it out and to practice, everybody is anxious when you're getting ready for an interview. So this type of preparation will alleviate a significant amount of that anxiety. You're going to walk into the interview feeling more confident and prepared, and that will definitely lessen your anxiety. So again, this document will be emailed to you after the presentation. Now, another great tool, and we've referenced this in other presentations as part of this job search series, but Glassdoor is a website where you can check and see if there are some common interview questions for positions that they have filled in the past. So let's take a look, or they're posting. So let's take a look at this website, and if we can get to that. Bear with me here. Okay. My apologies, for some reason I can't get to that website. So, but the navigation is here. You're going to go to the UAS Career Services site and then go to Job Search Resources. The Glassdoor icon is found on that particular page, on the Job Search Resources page. And then go ahead and search for a company and then find the interviews. And then from there, you can go down and look at the different positions that interview questions were included. I was working with a student who was applying for a job in the lower 48 at a university down in Georgia. So we went to Glassdoor, we looked at the different positions that people had applied for, and then the interview questions that were with those different positions, and we found a pattern of questions that were asked consistently for different positions. So, and sure enough, when it came to her interview, they asked some of those questions. So it was great for her to be able to prepare for those, and Glassdoor is where we found them. Now, another thing is to just become familiar with the platforms, and I don't know if any of you have had virtual interviews and what platforms have been used. If you have, go ahead and type in that type of platform in the chat box, but it seems like more common, Zoom is what is being used. However, I've seen Cisco WebEx. I was talking to another student that was getting ready for an interview, and they said that the interview was on the Cisco WebEx platform. So you can check into that. Their YouTube is a great way to preview the different types of components with these platforms. So if you're not familiar, check out YouTube, and you should be able to find out a little bit more about it. Skype is the big S, and it seems like that's not being used as often. However, you still see it come up every once in a while. Microsoft Teams is another platform that I think is being used more frequently. Now, the last one on the bottom, HireVue, this is interesting. So if you ever have an opportunity for an interview with HireVue, just know that it's an interesting platform that uses artificial intelligence. And what the artificial intelligence will do is it's scanning your face and evaluating your facial expressions, and then giving kind of a summary to the hiring manager of what those facial expressions mean, which is kind of freaky in some ways. But so if that's the case, just know that that's what they're doing. That's what that platform is using. And if you do have an opportunity to interview with HireVue, let us know. I haven't had anybody yet, so I'd be curious to know what that experience was like. So, setting the stage, getting your space ready. We all know that the background is really important. I was just on a Google Hangout meeting, and I could clearly see that the background was a person's bedroom. And even though sometimes that space is the only space that you have, but just be thoughtful about what people are seeing in the background. I know with Zoom, you can create a virtual background, so you can kind of play with that and see if that would work. But check your camera phone or your laptop phone or your laptop camera, and just kind of see what's in the background and be mindful of that. And the picture that we have on the slide is just a pile of, dirty clothes or clean clothes. The lighting is also important. There's light coming in from the windows, so you can adjust your laptop or your phone's cameras just so the lighting looks better. So give an idea as far as where you might want to position yourself. Then also distractions. If you're using a laptop or a tablet for your interview and using the camera there, and if you have your phone, then make sure you turn your phone off, or at least definitely turn it to silent, because you don't want to be distracted, because it seems like when you're in the middle of an interview, that's when the phone rings. And as you're trying to focus on the interview, it is really distracting. So keep that in mind. In your camera, just adjusting it, making sure that it's showing what you want it to show, too close, too far away, etc. So you do all these things ahead of time so you're ready to go before the interview. So as we talked about, what can be seen in the background? Can they clearly see your face? Here's just some checkpoints. Is your audio working correctly? Test with a friend, family member, or career services. We are absolutely here if you want to do a mock type of a virtual interview with one of the career services at your campus. So feel free to do that. And then have your star story prompts, your resume, your cover letter, and a pad to take notes on nearby. You don't know if they're going to reference something in your resume that you'd like to go back to. That's also a good thing to do in preparation, is to review your resume to see what they have read about you, because something might come up, as well as your cover letter. So if you have those handy, then you can reference those fairly quickly. And the notepad is really great to have, because oftentimes interviews, and this has been the case also with virtual interviews, it's not just one person interviewing you, it's usually a panel. And so you could have 2 or 3 different people that are part of the interview. And it's nice to be able to jot their names down. Oftentimes their names are shown on their screen, but when that interview goes away, you may have lost their names. And that's important when it comes to closing the deal and sending a thank you email. So have a pad of paper nearby. Now, dressing up. Of course, we've all seen the videos of people who have only dressed up from, the waist up, and that's a little concerning. And so just with that in mind, as well as what do you want to wear, what should you wear for a virtual interview, the thing that I tell students and alumni is to try on some different ensembles and find out which one you feel more comfortable and confident in. And oftentimes, just a combination of a couple different things will make all the difference in the world. And so as you're presenting yourself online, it also helps you feel more professional as you're, on the other end, answering the questions. The other thing to keep in mind is the body language. It really does matter. Make sure that you have some inflection in your voice. Smiling is always good. There's something about that engages people, because you just have this visual. So how can you engage people just on a visual level? It also shows that you're paying attention, you're interacting with them. Eye contact, just like I'm doing right now, I'm staring right at the camera. And so what you can do to help focus on the camera lens is to find a picture of something that makes you smile. Could be a pet, a child, a family member, or a hike somewhere, and tape that in the back somewhere that is in the same view as your camera. And then you'll be able to look at that, and it will also help you just remember to smile. Now, sitting or standing, What is preferred? My opinion is sitting, just because when I'm standing, and you may be different, so you can kind of gauge this for yourself. When I'm standing, I tend to move around, and we have all seen this in different Zoom meetings that we've been on. That movement by the presenter is distracting. So find a place where you're not going to be moving as much, but also where you're comfortable, and just kind of figure out what would be best. Using gestures is usually always encouraged with face-to-face interviews. With virtual interviews, sometimes, you know, a hand up in the air. So if you're making gestures like I'm doing right now, sometimes that's a little bit distracting. So kind of adjust your camera lens to see what works best. And as we all have had some experiences watching different presentations and having Zoom meetings and other types of meetings with people, you notice what gestures are, you know, like I said, are distracting or not distracting, and then kind of take it from there. Another thing, like we've been told by lots of different health authorities, especially in during this pandemic, is don't touch your face. But oftentimes we do have nervous types of gestures that could involve touching your face. If you have some nervous gestures like playing with your hair or jiggling your knee or your leg, those kinds of things we need to be aware of and just try to minimize those to the best of our ability. But just a couple of things to keep in mind as you're maybe practicing, and see if those things can be put into place. Now, here's some really great suggestions on what to do if your video or audio stops working. If you have your phone nearby, and make sure that you have the phone number of somebody there that you've been in contact with about this interview, then you can reach out to them and also let them know that you're having some technical difficulties. If noise interrupts the conversation, then as you practice for a potential interview, then you can practice muting your microphone for just a few moments, and then let them know, kind of go through if you run into that situation. So it would be very easy and simple for you to just go to what you need to do. And then if someone enters the room unexpectedly, which we've seen, oh my gosh, there's some hilarious videos out there. There's one of the little girl that's coming into the room of her dad. Oh my gosh, that's hysterical. But we don't want that to happen. But if it does, here's how you mitigate that. So you can just, again, if you practice this, then if something like that happens, you're ready to go. The next question is, so how soon should you be there? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes early? I know in face-to-face interviews, when a candidate arrives more than 15 minutes before the interview, it doesn't work as well for the people who are conducting the interview, because they need some time to either kind of go through and summarize the previous candidate, getting ready for you, maybe taking a break, and to have the candidate sitting there waiting is just not preferable from an interviewer's standpoint. So I think I had one student that was glad that she was there 15 minutes early. She was able to make sure that everything was ready to go. The interviewers came in at about 10 minutes early, and they were ready to go. So they actually started the interview about 5 minutes before the scheduled time. So that helped them have some additional time for maybe the next candidate, and it allowed the person not to sit there and get a little, you know, nervous as you're waiting, as we all do. So 15 to 10 minutes ahead of time, I think, is good. At the end of the interview, they always ask if you have any questions. And the kiss of death for interviews is if you don't have any questions, or if you say something to the effect of, you know, no, that was great, thank you, I think you covered everything that I needed to know. This is a lost opportunity. What I will be sending you as a follow-up to this session is a list of some questions that you can ask at the end of the interview. And in fact, I'm going to actually bring this up so I can give you just a quick preview. So let's give this a shot. So here's a list of some of the questions that you could ask at the end of the interview. The very first one is an interesting one because what you can do if you ask that question, and you might make a note of this, is if you are in an interview, a panel interview, and you have 2 or 3 different people and you ask this question, then you're going to get different answers from them. And then what you can do with those answers is you can incorporate those answers into your thank you note. So as you ask this question, you can kind of gauge if this is one you want to use, but that is definitely the advantage for question number 1. Question number 2 is a good one to ask perhaps because you're going to learn what their expectations are, and oftentimes when you have an employee and they leave for whatever reason, there are certain things that they did really well, and there could have been some gaps in what they were able to do. So with each new hire, they look for the next candidate that could possibly fill those gaps that the previous employee didn't. So this is a question that could be a good one. Number 3 is the one that stumps them every time. So I would suggest using number 3 for sure. I can honestly say probably about 95% of the students that have asked this question, the interviewers go, huh, that's a really good question. And they have to think about it. It shows them that you've done your homework, and it shows them that you are asking thoughtful types of questions. And in this particular case with number 3, you'll be able to identify what their expectations are within, and you can use 6 to 12 months, you can bring it down to 2 to 6 months or 2 to 8 months, whatever you want to do for the first and the second there. Especially with seasonal positions where you're going to be there for a few months, so it could be within 1 month to 4 months or 3 months. So what are the success factors down the road that will tell you that bringing this person on board was the right decision? And so it shows them, or actually it tells you what their expectations are, and it causes them to be able to articulate what that is and how fast they want you to be ramped up and ready to go, what they need you to know or be able to do within that particular time frame. So I would highly recommend using this question as one of the questions you would ask at the end of the interview. The others are just some additional suggestions. The company culture, there are some of these as well, and the reason that we've included these is the number 1 reason why people are either they either leave a position or they're terminated is because they didn't fit the company culture. And every company has a culture. Oftentimes you can get an idea of what that is by perusing their website. They can, when you look at their vision or their values, then a lot of that is at least kind of, talked about. In this case, if you want to use some of these, sometimes these are appropriate, sometimes not, but it's something to consider when you are, when you're looking at what types of questions you want to include. So again, that document will be emailed to you following this presentation. Now, after you get finished with your 3 questions, and just a note on this, if I could add, you can jot this down as well, is I come prepared with 3 to 4 questions, and generally I ask 2. I gauge the fatigue factor of the interviewers to see if maybe I've got room for a 3rd one. So you have to kind of use your gut on that to figure out, do I just go with 1, 2, and maybe stretching it a bit, 3 questions. So you have those questions that you are interested in asking, and throughout the interview, there might be some other questions that come up that you do want to write down to get some further clarification, but this is just a suggestion for that. Now at the end, they say, you know, okay, Jeff, do you have any additional questions that we can answer for you? Then you launch into what we call asking for the job. And basically it would sound something like this. It's like, no, that was great. Those questions, the answers to my questions were fantastic. Thank you so much for that information. It was really helpful. I just want you to know that I would really love to have this job. And I want to thank you again for the opportunity to interview for the position. Now, this is what I have used in the past when I ask for the job at the end of interviews that I've participated in. But if you want to Google asking for the job at the end of the interview, you'll see a lot of different examples. Some are a little bit more frontal, but you can glean what you want from there and come up with your own answer, what you would like to say when you're at the end of the questions that you've asked at the end. Then this is something that is extremely important because a lot of job candidates do not do this. So if you want to beat out your competition, then make sure that you send a thank you. And right now, thank you emails are great. And I've got an example of what you could say in a thank you email to an employer after the interview. You can also Google this and see what other kinds of examples and then put together your particular one based on inspiration from others that you see. The other thing too is, especially in your city, so if you're in Sitka, Anchorage, Juneau, and you can actually drop off a thank you card. I know that's kind of questionable during the time we're in right now, but if you really want to up your game, then you can put together an actual, physical thank you card and then drop it off at the front desk and they can distribute it to the people who interviewed you. I do have a template that I am happy to share that you can actually run through your computer, and it basically prints out the content of your email and then you just sign it, because my handwriting's awful. So if I can print it out, then that's what I would want to do. For the job I'm in right now, I did that. I had, I think, 8 people on the panel for my current position. So I had 8 thank you cards that I put together and I dropped off at the university within 24 hours of the interview. So make sure that you either get something in their inbox within 24 hours, and if it's a panel interview, then make sure that you personalize and send separate emails to each panel member. Don't just put the group as a whole and send one. That's also really important. So here's an example of the thank you that I have put together that I've used in the past. To be able to use this as inspiration, but you're also welcome, like I said, to go out and look at some other examples and see how you want to put yours together. So we address it as it is. You can kind of gauge if you want to put Mr. or Ms. or just use the first name. And then there's also at the bottom underneath your name is your phone number. And that's a good thing to have, because in case they want to contact you soon, they don't have to go find it. It's right there, ready to go. Okay, that pretty much concludes our session today. If you have any questions in the chat box, then we'll be able to take a look at that. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, Jeff Budd.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Complete to Compete program, we want to thank you for attending. The session is over. We'll go to questions now. If you have to leave, thank you again for your participation.